This is BIV Today, the daily business video show and podcast from the journalists at BIV. I'm Haley Wooden. Today, we take a deeper look at the latest MNP Consumer Debt Index. It's always something that I like to look at. It has interesting data and insights on how households are feeling about their finances. But this latest one is particularly interesting because it gives us a little more insight into how households are feeling about those finances throughout the pandemic. Joining me with more insight on this is Lana Gilbertson, a licensed insolvency trustee with MNP based in Vancouver. Lana, great to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me back. It's great to be here.
What really stands out to you most about this latest version of the index?
Well, I think that what we found interesting for British Columbia was that there was more pessimism among British Columbians than there was among the rest of Canada. So only just over half of British Columbians feel confident about their ability to cover their living expenses in the next 12 months without going further into debt.
Yeah, that's pretty surprising. Why do you think that is? Why do we have the least confidence among provinces in Canada?
Well, I think that in British Columbia, there is, again, based on what we're hearing from the poll respondents, there's less wiggle room in the budgets of British Columbians. Just over 4 in 10 British Columbians are $200 a month or less away from being unable to pay their bills. About just under 3 in 10 say that they already can't pay their obligations every month. They're insolvent. And we've for years now, I think there's been a lot of talk about the cost of housing, the cost of living. It's expensive to live here.
Absolutely. And you think too of how many people may have lost their jobs or other forms of income during the pandemic, and it just compounds the debt problems they may have been dealing with before, right?
Well, and that's just it. I mean, British Columbians were already, I think, struggling leading up to the pandemic. And, this may be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak. Insolvency filings, formal insolvency filings among consumers were on the rise leading up to the pandemic. Now we know that they have taken a giant pause. And I think that that's due to all the government support that's sort of propping up British Columbians, along with mortgage deferrals and creditors generally working cooperatively with debtors. But, when things return to some sense of normalcy, I do expect insolvency filings to return to the pre-pandemic levels and probably, I would say, increase significantly.
Mm-hmm. That would make sense. What are you hearing either from the poll respondents or even anecdotally in your work when it comes to those government programs? Are there any programs that have been particularly helpful for individuals?
Well, a lot of people that we're helping right now are on CERB, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. There's a lot of people who have had their employment affected, and that money is a lifesaver for them. And, so that's definitely a big one for small business. It's that Canada Emergency, I'm sorry, I'm struggling with the acronyms. There's so many of them, but there's a business account that, provides $40,000 assistance to pay, obligations. So there's really a lot of assistance for Canadians right now. And I do think that that's going a long way to prop them up.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the credit card debt situation? When we've had you on our podcast before, we've spoken a little bit about sort of the mortgage piece to indebtedness, but also that credit card piece. Would it be reasonable to think that maybe consumers and households are putting a little bit more on their credit cards at this point in time?
Yes. And I think that's true. Absolutely. And I know that too is something that is where folks are a little, they're not quite ready to file a formal insolvency proceeding, even though that might be an eventual reality. They don't want to give up their credit cards. They're afraid, right? Because for some folks, that is with no savings in place, no emergency savings. Available credit is something that people turn to when they're facing unexpected expenses. So there's, I think, a real fear of giving up access to credit right now.
You mentioned savings, and I think that's a really important lesson in all of this. And now might not be a possible time for many people to save, but what should we take away from this pandemic about how much we should be saving for rainy days or very stormy periods of time we might go through?
I say both. Why not? I think that right now, I think has given people a real opportunity to take a step back and evaluate priorities, if you will. Which certainly curb spending has an impact on the economy as well. Although I think that people are understanding. That they need less perhaps to live on, and they're getting used to living on a more scaled back version, I guess. And I think people really recognize right now how important it is to have savings. And again, I think we have to plan for all possibilities.
Absolutely. Now, a formal insolvency filing, that seems daunting. What are some of the options consumers might have before they get to that point?
Right. Well, I mean, one of the first things that we suggest people do is talk to their creditors. We're doing a lot of that right now. Suggesting that people reach out to their creditors and see if there's any opportunity to reduce interest rates. Again, flexibility around payments, things like that. For folks that are not seeing any cooperation with their creditors, maybe they're too far down the collection path. There's a process called a consumer proposal that is an insolvency proceeding. And when we say an insolvency proceeding, we mean that it's a legal process that's governed by legislation in Canada. So a consumer proposal is really just a settlement, a legal settlement with creditors that sees a consumer paying back a portion of the debt. And then bankruptcy, of course, is available for those folks that have really tried everything, but don't have the resources to pay creditors. And, we certainly see, more bankruptcy filings for folks that have lower levels of income, no assets. So it's more common when there isn't any payment ability. But these are great options for people, and I think. I think right now too, again, part of this sort of stepping back and reflecting is, anyone that has been struggling with debt or is now starting to be concerned about their debt levels, it's a really good time to get some professional advice about what the options are. A conversation with a licensed insolvency trustee, there's no cost. We provide professional, unbiased advice about what the options are. And most people feel a real sense of relief just knowing, what the options are.
And it might be helpful too to have an advocate on your side or a professional on your side who can help engage with creditors or have those conversations on your behalf. Have you found that creditors are a little bit more flexible than in the past, just given the unexpected nature of the pandemic?
Definitely. Yeah, we definitely see creditors supporting people, particularly in proposals, right? The consumer proposal, the legal settlement I mentioned. We're definitely seeing creditors supporting proposals that are offering lower recoveries because, again, people just don't have the same level of payment ability that they did before COVID. So, yes, they're being very cooperative.
Lana, as always, a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks so much for coming on with your insight.
Thanks for having me.
That's Lana Gilbertson, a licensed insolvency trustee based in Vancouver with MNP. And this is BIV Today. Thanks for listening and watching. We'll be back with a new podcast and video tomorrow.